Blog Talk Radio.
Bichamo Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut, Neye Ojirada, Medinde Odwirafo, Kwesi, Nehem, Ptah, Akhan. Akwamumai, Marukai, Sipimu, Odwirafo. Ojiraman Mu. That means greetings to all Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut people, meaning African Black people. Today is Odwira Day, Purification Day. My name is Odwirafo, Kwesi, Nehem, Ptah, Akhan. Odwirafo be a Kwamu nation in North America within Odwira mine, purified nation, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut people, African people, Black people in the Western Hemisphere. Yet I'll say we thank you for tuning in to the broadcast once again. We are opening up the chat room right now. If you are on the phone line and you have a question or a comment, simply hit the number 1 so that we can see that your hand is raised. If you are in the chat room, and you would like to post a question or a comment in the chat room, you must log in with a username in order to interact in the chat room. If you do not have a username, you can sign up for one quickly in Blog Talk, and therefore you can connect in the chat room. For the individuals who are new to the broadcast, we have 3 broadcasts on a weekly basis. On Joda, which is Mondays, we have Akhanfo Nanason, ancient, authentic Akhan ancestral religion. So we deal specifically with the Akhan expression of ancestral religion on Akhanfo Nanason, clarifying concepts, clarifying philosophy, cosmology, ritual practice, and so forth, clarifying the understanding of the nature of Inyamewa and Inyame, the supreme being, the great mother and great father, the nature of the Abosom, the deities, the nature of the Nananom, Instamafo, the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors, clarifying the nature of their relationship to us, and clarifying the nature of our people as Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut people, especially in the Western Hemisphere, who were forced into the Western Hemisphere during the Musu Okete, the Great Perversity, the enslavement era. However, we migrated and were forced to migrate into these regions where we carry our ancestral religious practices with us in our blood circle. We are connected to Abosom, deities, forces in nature. We are connected to Nananom Nsamafo, pre-incarnation, and therefore when we are born into the world, we carry our ancestral religious practices wherever we migrate or are forced to migrate. So we are dependent on no one outside of our direct ancestral blood circle for our ancestral religious practice, our ancient, authentic ancestral religious practice. So we deal with Akhanfo Nanason, specifically the Akhan expression of ancestral religion on Joda Monday night. On Ojira Da, Purification Day, Tuesday night, Benada, Abinada, we have Ojira. Ojira means purification. It also means a celebration of purification in the language of ancient Kamit and Kanat, Egypt and Nubia, but also in, of course, the Akhan language. Jira means purification. It also means a celebration of purification. Of course, the Akhan language is directly derived from our ancestral language of ancient Kanat, which is a title of ancient Nubia, as well as Kamit. So we talk about purification, purifying cosmology, culture, ritual practice, the nature of our relationship to the Supreme Being, the Great Mother, Great Father, the deities, the ancestral spirits, their connection to us via our blood circles, as we said, but we don't just focus specifically on the Akhan expression, but we focus on Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut ancestral religion in general, Nanasom in general. Ancestral religion is the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance. That means through ritual, we as Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut people, African people, Black people, and Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut people only, through ritual, we incorporate those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to incorporate in order to harmonize our thoughts, intentions, and actions with divine order. And through ritual, we reject those things, objects, deeds, and entities that we need to reject, repel, hate, repulse, in order to restore balance to our thoughts, intentions and actions, and therefore restore order, realign ourselves with order. Expansive and contractive poles of ancestral religion, Afuraitkaitnut ancestral religion, or Nanason, which is our general term for ancestral religion. The expansive pole and the contractive pole are the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance. So we incorporate law and restore balance, expansion and contraction, inhalation and exhalation. That is ancestral religion. ODWIRA, or purification, operationalizes Nanason. Purification operationalizes our ritual practice of incorporating law and our ritual practice of restoring balance. Every thought, every intention, every action, every moment of every day throughout the course of our lives. So we talk about how ancestral religion impacts every aspect of our lives, every moment of our lives, because we are always seeking to align ourselves or realign ourselves in every thought, intention, and action every moment of every day to divine order. That is our obligation. That is our mandate as Afuraitkaitnut people. So we talk about clarifying text from ancient Kamit, as well as oral text and ritual practices and so forth, cosmology, culture, philosophy, ritual practice, from whatever expression ancestral religion takes, whether it is various expressions on the continent of Afuraikai, or those expressions that we brought into the Western Hemisphere in our blood circles in the forms of hoodoo, which is the Akhan tradition in North America, juju, which is the Yoruba tradition, born of the blood circles of North America, Vodou, which is the Fall and Eve tradition, born of the blood circles of our people who are forced into North America, the Gri tradition, which is the Bambara tradition, born of the blood circles of our people who were brought into North America, the Gala Geechee tradition, which are the Gola and Kisi traditions, the West Afuraitkai that were brought in the blood circles of our people in North America, the Congo tradition, brought in the blood circles of our people in North America. So we maintained our ancestral religious practices right here in the Western Hemisphere. They impact every aspect of our lives, and we therefore must align ourselves with reality, with divine order, with the Great Mother and Great Father, Aminet, Amen, Nyamewa, Nyame, in order to function harmoniously in creation as we are designed to do. So this is what we deal with on ODWIRA. Wednesday nights, Awukuda, Akuada. Wednesday we have Egua Marketplace, and on the Egua Marketplace show, we highlight Afuraitkaitnut businesses, organizations, and institutions that are serving our community in a positive capacity and also maintain their ancestral religious values in the process and convey those values through their service to the community. So we've had many individuals come on to talk about their businesses, organizations, and institutions. That was us for the entire 2-hour show. We have their websites on our OCOM Economic Development Model page on our website, because part of the process of dealing with Egua Marketplace and showcasing these businesses, as well as talking about the philosophy behind our approach to trade and commerce rooted in our ancestral religious values, part of that process is that we published the OCOM Economic Development Model, which is an economic development model rooted in our ancestral religious values, meaning it is a holistic approach, a fully holistic approach to economic development rooted in our culture, the foundation of our culture, not imitating the whites in our offspring, not imitating Asians and anybody else and their economic models, structuring our own economic models that will serve us and meet our highest ideals and so forth, rooted in our ancestral religious values. So you can go to the OCOM Economic Development Model page on our website, and we'll place that link right now in the chat room. When you go to that page, you will see the OCOM Economic Development Model. You can download that publication for free. You can download the 4-part series that we did on Blog Talk. We uploaded as videos on YouTube and up to the page as well, where we dissected the model and showed its applications to various aspects of our lives. Also, we have the Egua Kundi Economic Warfare broadcast, as well as the Nokwariko Ne Amamre Self-Employment and Ancestral Culture broadcast. You can access all of that on the page. The economic development model, you can download that publication. You will also see the list of businesses, organizations, and institutions that have come onto the show. You can link up to their websites on the page and also the links to their interviews that they did with us on the show. You can download those as well and listen to those and hear directly from them. This is part of our process in the Akhan economic development model, is to starve the beast and feed the pride. That means we make an assessment on a weekly basis to determine what funds we would have wasted with the whites in their offspring, and then we starve the beast and feed the pride. We take those funds, reallocate them away from those white businesses, starve that white beast, and redirect them to the business, organization, or institution of the week. Feed the pride. We target one business, organization, or institution per week for 52 weeks, and we began that process in February, so we are well into that process. We are targeting one per week for optimal capital infusion. So therefore, when we starve the beast and feed the pride, when one person engages that process and saves $15 they would have spent at McDonald's throughout the course of a week or 7-Eleven, and starves that white beast and feeds the pride, the business of the week, then that's a $15 infusion of capital. When 1,000 of our people engage that process in 1 week, that black business has received $15,000 that would have went to the whites in their offspring, our absolute enemy. But instead, we have starved the beast and fed the pride, and therefore the black business has that $15,000. It's going to go somewhere. If it's not going to our businesses, it's going to the businesses of our enemies, the whites and their offspring, which is foolish. So by default, if we do not engage in the process of starving the beast and feeding their pride, we are leaving the funds in the hands of our enemies. We are financing our own oppression. It doesn't matter if it's white Europeans, white Americans, white Hispanics, white Latinos, white pseudo-Native Americans, white Asians, spirits of disorder, our absolute enemies, all of them without exception. And when we give them our funds, we are feeding our enemies and starving ourselves. We need to reverse that process and starve the beast and feed the pride. So this is what we deal with on Egua Marketplace Day. So for the people who came on a little bit later, if you have a question or comment in the chat room, you must log in as a user to interact. If you have a question or a comment on the phone line, simply hit the number 1, and that way we can see that your hand is raised, and then we can connect with you. So, topic of tonight's show, Per Ankh, the House of Life, institution of learning and healing in ancient Kamit, as well as today. So we're examining the nature of the Per Ankh, the House of Life in ancient Kamit. It's an institution of learning, healing, and training. It's a model for institution building within our communities as Afuraitkaitnut people, African people, black people, who are working to operationalize all aspects of Amansesew nation building restoration. So we're going to put another link in the chat room real quick. Give me 1 second with that. And we're going to put the link to our AKONGUASUA. So we're going to show, first of all, the nature of the Per Ankh, and then we're going to show its application today. And as we're putting this in the chat room, you can download that link. So you can find information about the Per Ankh, the House of Life, all over the internet, various publications talking about this terminology dealing with ancient Kamit. So first of all, the term Per or Pir means house, sanctuary. You have Ankh, which means life, Ankh, Anku, Anket, various variations of that. So Per Ankh means the house of life. We're talking about the sanctuary of learning, sanctuary of healing in the temple space, an aspect of the temple space, and sometimes an annex to the temple structure as well, where all kinds of teaching, all kinds of healing, all kinds of learning takes place with priests, priestesses, not only dealing with ritual practices, but also scientific endeavors as well. So this is what we're talking about in ancient Kamit. If you look at the term Per, you have the term for house or sanctuary, Per, P-R, or Pir. Sometimes it's P-A, Pa, or Pe. So you have Pe, but then also Per with the R, so that means house or sanctuary. But Per also means to come forth. That's important because when you look in the Coptic dialect, the symbol for the letter P, it sometimes becomes a PH, which is the PH sound or the F sound, just like you have P in English, and the PH sounds like an F sound. So Per, so for example, the term Pa, Ra, P-A, Pa, the definite article Pa, and then the deity Ra, the creator, just like Ra is the creatress. Pa, Ra means the God, Ra meaning the, Ra, Pa, Ra, but Para becomes Pra in the title of Ra throughout the dynastic period, but then when you get to the late period in the Coptic dialect, Para becomes corrupted into Pare, and then Fre, P-H-R-E, Fre. So you have that change between the P and the PH, which sounds like an F. So Pit or Pa, meaning house, is also Per, P-A-R, or P-R, meaning house. But Per or Pera also means to come forth. When you look in the Akhan language, Fi or Fi means house, and Siri means to come forth, to come forth. So the same P-A, Pa, meaning house, and P-A-R, Para, meaning house, but Para also meaning to come forward. In Akhan, we have the Coptic dialectical variant. The P becomes an F, so Fi or Ofi or Ofie means house, but also means F-I-R-I means to come forth. So it's the same term. You also have Ankh, meaning life. In Akhan, Unkwa means life. So we have the same terms with the same meaning in both languages. And therefore, we can have an understanding of the definition of what Per Ankh actually is. When you look at the term Per Ankh, and they'll say the house of life or the temple structure or the temples and so forth, and the priests and priestesses in our Akhan culture, just like various other Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut cultures, wherever we are in the world. You have the Abosom Fie in our Akhan culture, or the Abosom Dai. Fie or Fie also again means house. Abosom means deity. So Abosom Fie means the Abosom of the deity, Fie or Fie, house. Also called Abosom Dine. Dine means sanctuary. It also means room. It means structure. Abosom Dine means the house, structure, sanctuary, Dine of the Abosom, the deity. So Abosom Fie and Abosom Dine means the sacred sanctuary of the divinity. Inside the Abosom Fie, the structure, the temple structure, you have the shrine for the deity. People engage the process of making offerings, communication, divination, and so forth with divinities. We learn directly from them through spirit possession and communication. The same thing with an Ile Orisha in the Yoruba tradition, same thing with a Humfor in Odun and so forth. So in ancient Kamit, of course, we have the exact same thing. We have the Per Ankh, or as in Akhan we say Fi Onkwa, talking about the house of life, the temple structure, the shrines of the divinities, the priests and priestesses engaging in the process of ritual, offering, engaging the divinities, spirit possession, spirit communication, and so forth. So this is the foundation. This is what we're talking about. We have these ancient models of that, but then we also have contemporary extensions of that process. Let's look at some information with regard to how it manifests in Kamit, how it's a learning institution, healing institution, training institution, and how we can model our institutions dealing with learning, healing, as well as training in different ways, not only spiritual cultivation, but also writing, publishing, also dealing with scientific innovation, and so forth, as well as medicine. So the first appearance in writing of the term Per Ankh dates to the so-called Old Empire, so-called Old Kingdom, when the requirements of a Per Ankh, so-called House of Life connected to a temple of the divinity Men, are mentioned in the decrees of the Imsu, the king, the sovereign Pepi II. Now, the oldest connection between the Per Ankh, or the House of Life, and writing is made in a so-called Middle Empire, so-called Middle Kingdom stela, which gives a certain keku, the title of scribe of the House of Life, scribe of the Per Ankh, the sesh of the Per Ankh, the scribe of the Per Ankh. At the same time, another scribe or sesh has the title of the chief physician, which points to the institution having had medical aspects such as the reproduction of medical texts and the formation of healers throughout its history, more so during the late period. The scribe, you have one of the scribes, Tawi Neat and Wachet Resnet, both bearing the title of chief physician, were involved in the restoration of the House of Life. Now, when you read information like that, you'll find it all over the internet and other publications and so forth. So you have priests and priestesses, but then you also have them being called chief physicians. So what's the connection between chief physician and a priest or a priest? We have the living culture, so we understand those direct connections. So anybody involved in ancestral religious practice, you go get divination from, for example, in the Akhan tradition, and Okumfo or Obosomfo, one of different classes of priests and priestesses. You also have Odum Sinifo and Odumafo, Odwirafo, and so forth. The Odum Sinifo, for example, is the root worker, root doctor, root medicine, and so forth. Odwirafo, the same thing. They're called a physician, but they also can conjure the spirit of the plant life, mineral life, and so forth, to communicate with and heal the client. So they're engaging in the conjuring of the spirit of the plant, as well as understanding the medicinal use, the medicinal properties of plant life and mineral life. So they are a spiritualist or ritualist, a conjurer, but also a medical doctor, a physician at the same time. It's combined in the same function, in the same office, because that's natural. There's no such thing as a separation from the spirit and the physical body. So this is part of our culture. Of course, in our book, Hoodoo People, we talk about the Odun Sinifo, and we talk about the term Undu, meaning medicine, specifically root medicine, root work, and so forth, and the Unduyefo, the Undu person. Of course, Undu is the origin of the term hoodoo. So we have the hoodoo man and hoodoo woman, the priest and priestess. We have the Odumafo in our Akhan culture, Oduma, which becomes the Unduman, or the hoodoo man and hoodoo woman, and so forth. It's the medicine-giving person, also called a spiritualist, ritualist, also called a root worker, root doctor, and so forth. So there's a connection. It's the same thing in the Yoruba tradition. It's a Babalao. Yes, they do divination. You have priests and priestesses of Ifa. They're doing divination to communicate with the Orisha when they're authentic, communicate with the Egungun when they're authentic, and actually communicate directly with them and tell you exactly what these Orisha, what these Egungun are saying, because they have some of them are clairvoyant, if they're authentic, or clairaudient and so forth. So not only do they cast shells or deal with the Opele chain and so forth, but they also communicate directly with these spirits in real time. You can hear from them, see them, and so forth. And then they can share that with the client. But they also understand the medicinal use of plant life and mineral life, and can create medicines, concoctions, and so forth that can heal the client based on the divination that they receive. So there's a connection between divination, connection between priesthood, priestesshood, medicine. Is about healing, restoring balance, and so forth. So this is what we're dealing with. So we have a direct living culture example that goes directly into our establishment of institutions today, where we can deal with Sum Yadie, spiritual illness, Honam Yadie, physical illness, and they're combined in the same office where people, when they engage in ancestral religions, they can begin to learn alternative healing practices. Of course, what is called alternative medicine in the Western Hemisphere, that was born of hoodoo, juju, voodoo, and so forth from our people here, learning the medicinal use of various plants and herbs. The whites and their offspring during enslavement and afterwards will go to our people to find out how to use these plants and herbs and so forth to heal, whether it was broken bones or different kinds of diseases. That became natural medicine and so forth. The whites and their offspring began to create synthetic medicines, and which creates all kinds of side effects and everything else. Then they began to go back towards quote-unquote alternative medicines, natural healing, and so forth. They would try to attribute everything to the pseudo-Native American, the migrant white Asian who was really not native to this hemisphere. Of course, our people were here first. In reality, it goes back to our people bringing that kind of knowledge here originally thousands of years ago, but then bringing it back once again once we were forced into this hemisphere during the Kwesi, the Great Perversity, the Enslavement era. So all of this natural healing, alternative healing, natural medicine, going back to the source, purifying ourselves and everything else, born out of the plantations of the people, where our people were on the plantations and where we escaped from the plantations and established our independent nations right in the midst of the so-called slave system and brought down the slave system because we waged war against the whites and our offspring. We have medicines to heal us of illnesses, but we also have medicines to kill. We wage war against our enemies, chemical and biological warfare. So when you're talking about priests and priestesses in a Per Ankh, a house of life, in a obosum fie, abosum dine, ile orisha, so forth. We're talking about people who can communicate with the abosom, communicate with the Nsamanso for healing, restoration, physically and spiritually, but also for our defense. So this is what they're talking about in ancient Kamit. We're just living the culture. So when they talk about this kind of thing, when you read these kind of dry statements about there was a chief physician in the house of life and showing that it points to the institution having had a medical aspect, such as the reproduction of medical texts and so forth, yet we reproduce medical texts as well, and other forms of, publications as well. We were the first people, of course, engaged in writing, and part of that process was happening within the Per Ankh, within the house of life. So, another critical piece with regards to that. For example, on this website, they say the oldest connection known between the house of life and writing is made on a middle kingdom, a middle empire stela, talking about the scribe, Keka or Keku, the sesh, the scribe of the Per Ankh, the house of life, and also talking about the chief physician. And then they talked about the late period. What does scribing have to do with the house of life? Is it just talking about writing books, writing down formulae and so forth? That scribing or writing goes back once again. It has to do with our ancestral religion. And we've talked about this in the past. We've brought this information forward so our people can really understand what these texts are talking about, not simply imitating the misinformation by the whites and their offspring regarding our ancestral religious practices and trying to blacken up misinformation because our people really aren't involved in the culture, but we're talking about real information. When you're brainwashed with the whites and their offspring, but present yourself as Afrocentric, African-centered, or cultural and so forth, you will simply regurgitate the foolishness of white so-called Egyptologists, and you will simply blacken it up and try to call it something else, to try to make it appear that it's your own, thoughts about these matters, which is not. So when that takes place, someone will read a text from ancient Kamit, and it will say something like, Tehuti and Seshat taught our people how to write and taught our people about writing and recording and measuring and so forth. The Negro who claims to be African-centered or Afrocentric, but really are Eurocentric in their mindset, pseudo-scholar, pseudo-researchers, the first thing they'll do is try to deny the reality of what our people said. So if our people said in the text that Tehuti taught us writing and Seshat taught us writing, the first thing the Negro will do in their analysis is to say, well, actually, they didn't teach us writing, so we need to find out why that's not true, why they really didn't teach us writing. Just like the whites and their offspring, they will try to seek to deny agency to the divinity. They want to seek to make the divinities non-existent, just anthropomorphizations of Ashe, or representative principles of different aspects of our psychological anatomy, which is idiotic. In reality, when you have people talking that kind of nonsense, number one, they're aping the nonsense of the whites and their offspring. The whites and their offspring have an agenda. They know the deities are real, but they also know they cannot communicate with them, and the deities will never communicate with them. So they don't want us listening or communicating with any forces in nature, which we have the capacity to do, because then we will not obey them. We'll be listening to the deities, and when they direct us to massacre the whites and their offspring, we will move forward with that. So they can't control that. They can't control spirit possession. They can't stop a deity from possessing us. They can't stop a deity from communicating with us. So they want us to stop listening to what the Abosom direct us to do. They want us to stop listening to what the Nsamampo, the spiritually cultivated ancestors and ancestors, want us to do. So this is the reason they put forward this foolish notion that the deities don't exist. Not because it's real. They know they exist. They're just angry over the fact that they can't communicate with them, and they see the danger of us communicating with them, because then they lose their control. So the first thing they do, and when they set up these, fields of study, fields of inquiry, like Egyptology and so forth, there are really structures in place to destroy the culture, to hide information, to destroy the culture, to misrepresent the culture. That's what Egyptology is about. It's not about accessing information and sharing information and, researching and so forth. It is designed as a military operation, just like they would send the missionaries into Afuraitkaitnut and anthropologists into Afuraitkaitnut to sit with the people, and the people who are foolish enough to allow them to sit with them and quote-unquote learn about their culture and learn. They just acting like they just want to learn about how the people operated. That's a military tactic. Send the anthropologists, send the so-called, priests and pastors in first to find out exactly how the people operate. Find out if there are any possible weaknesses. Find out if they are at odds with another neighboring ethnic group. Who's the more powerful? Get on the side of the weaker group and say, well, we can assist you in overthrowing your neighbor who has been dominating you for a while. If we join together, we can overthrow them. And maybe the weaker group will ally with you temporarily as a cracker to take out the neighboring black group, and simply the whites and offspring begin to foment further war, exacerbate further tension and so forth. That's part of a military tactic. Find out where the weaknesses are, find out where the disgruntled are in the society, and exploit those divisions, hopefully to deepen those divisions. Once you can engage that process, then you can send the military afterwards. It's the same thing with Egyptology. Send the whites and their offspring into the lands to invade, find out information, and misrepresent the information, so that when we get information, if we're just listening to our enemies, the whites and their offspring, then we listen to misinformation. We're turned off by misinformation. We don't want to have anything to do with it, or it appeals to our sensibilities when our sensibilities have been conditioned by the whites and their offspring, so they're warped and corrupt, and therefore we seek to perpetuate that warped and corrupt sensibility under the guise of scholarship. This is what Egyptology is about. So the first thing the whites and their offspring do, when we say the deities taught us writing, scribing, and so forth, the first thing the cracker says is, well, obviously they didn't mean that, so let's look at what they really meant, and they go and totally corrupt what our people actually said. And the brainwashed Negro who thinks that they're a scientist, they will go and do the exact same thing. Our people say, Tahuti and Sashap taught us writing, and the Negro, the idiot, will turn around and say, the first thing they will say is, they didn't teach us writing, so let's see what they really meant. In reality, when you actually engage the culture, then you already know who Tahuti and Sashap are, as we talked about in previous broadcasts where we dealt specifically with them. They still exist in the Akhan tradition, the Yoruba tradition, all the traditions wherever black people are in the world, because they're forces in nature, they exist. And we still communicate with them, and they possess and they still teach. When we say they taught us writing and the Medusa and so forth, that means they taught us writing the Medusa. When they were possessed, and they still engage that process today, them as well as other Abosom Orisha Vodou, when they possess, and the deity possesses and grabs the stick and draws symbols in the dirt, in the sand, and enunciates the name of the symbol and encourages you to repeat that name. They just taught you a symbol. The deities taught us writing, taught us what these symbols are, brought the Medusa, the hieroglyphs to us, taught us to use them, directed us to use them, and we've been using them ever since. That's ancient Kamit, Kanat, as well as the various symbols that we have all over the continent, the various scripts and so forth, coming from the abosom, confirmed by the Nananom Nsumafo, coming from the deities, confirmed by the ancestresses and ancestors, and promoted in that fashion. So when you talk about scribing, and here in on this particular website, they're talking about scribing in the House of Life, and it's first attested in the Middle Empire. Of course, this is what they have found. But why would scribing be associated with the House of Life, with the temple and so forth? Well, some people will say, well, because Tahuti is the scribe and he just represents wisdom and represents writing and represents this and represents that. In reality, Tahuti and Seshada divinities, they're directly, the high priest and high priestess and so forth. So scribing is directly related to that. It begins with talking about divination. So when you have divination, when you cast shells or you use other implements, that's a script in and of itself, patterns in and of themselves that speak, that carry energy. Those patterns release a specific configuration of energy, a matrix of energy that is a magnet for the abosom that governs that specific matrix, that specific aspect of the divinatory system. You pull those divinities in, create a welcome mat for them so they'll be drawn into the sphere so they can communicate directly with you on a more profound level. Same thing with the Unsumanfo. So the divinatory implements in and of themselves, when they are used, are creating that script energically through their pattern. They're releasing an energetic pattern in creation that can be read. So that's part of the divination. The second part of the scribing with regard to divination is when, just as Tahuti and Seshat taught us through spirit possession how to write symbols down and what they represent, when people engage in divinatory practices, very often what they do, when they have an assistant, they do the divination, and they have the assistant write down or scribe what came out in the divination. And of course, in ancient times, we would use our ancient symbols. We weren't using English and so forth. But you have someone scribing or writing down what came out in the divination. Or if they don't have an assistant, if the priest or priestess doesn't have an assistant, they will scribe that out themselves so they can convey that information. They convey it to you orally so you can hear those sound vibrations. They can stimulate you and so forth and generate those images within your mind of what's taking place. But then they also scribe it graphically, so those geometric forms that carry power. Why do they carry power? Because the deities themselves showed us which geometric forms carry the energy of specific divinities, specific sounds. And we have addressed that in our NS sounds of the abosom, the nature of their birth names broadcast. So they showed us which symbols and which combination of symbols we need to utilize to carry the energy of specific sound and to generate certain images within our mind. They taught us how to do that, so we use those symbols to scribe or reflect what took place in the divination, so the person not only hears it directly from the priest or priestess, but even when they leave, they have graphic representation of that, which is a magnet itself. It becomes a shrine itself. What has been scribed on a clay tablet, what has been scribed on a leaf, what has been scribed on some cloth, some papyrus, or in stone, whatever it is, on clothing, with dye and so forth, whatever it is, chalk and things like that on the body, whatever it is, whatever form that the graphic representation takes, the person has a miniature shrine, a shrine in miniature. Those images, those symbols and so forth become magnets for the abosom and the Nsumanfo, the deities and ancestral spirits who are connected with that energetic configuration that governs the reading. So now you have something that has been scribed that can also inform you in a spiritual fashion, stimulate your spirit. Scribing, writing, comes from divination. And then later on, we continue that process in a more mundane level for everyday usage. But it starts off from the deities that gave us writing, dealing with divination, and then utilized throughout the society. So this is the association of Tahuti and Seshat and the Per Ankh, the House of Life, and the priests and the priestesses and so forth, even up until today. Even if a person doesn't have an assistant, they would scribe the things themselves, or they would direct the priest or priestess. When a client comes, they receive that divination, the priest or priestess will direct the person to sit down and scribe, whether through symbols or through phonetic symbols or ideograms and so forth, what is represented in that reading. So when they take what they have written themselves home and reflect on that or place it on their shrine, it becomes a magnet for Abosom and Unsamafo once again. So the scribing in and of itself comes directly from divination initially, and then it's utilized in different capacities. So these are the kinds of things you don't get when you read a little paragraph saying the oldest connection between the house of life and writing is made on a Middle Kingdom stela, which gives a certain keku the title of scribe of the house of life. They're not going to teach you that. And then it says at the same time another scribe has the title of chief physician. They're not showing you the connection between the physician as the spiritualist, as the priest or priestess who can communicate with the spirits of the plants and conjure the deities that govern that plant life, bring those spirits down to help heal the person. That spiritualist is the chief physician, but also a priest or priestess, but also has a scribe there, just like the Huti and Seshada, scribing for Ra and Raed and Amen and Amenet. The priest or priestess is doing the divination, communicating with the divinities, finding out what the will of the divinities is, and then has their little scribe, their miniature to Huti and Seshat, sitting down there writing out what came out in the divination to give to the client, or they have the client, him or herself, scribe that information. That's a structure that was in place in ancient Kamit, is in place today, wherever we are in the world, as long as we're practicing our ancestral religion practice. So this is what we're dealing with. All right, so let's get down to a little bit more information with regard to the House of Life, the Per Ankh. We're showing how these things, there's a cultural continuity and how they impact every aspect of our lives in a tangible fashion. So we're not talking about fake religion, like fictional cartoon characters like Jesus and Muhammad and Moses and Allah and Yahweh and Brahman and Buddha and so forth. Fictional cartoon characters who never existed of any race or in any form. And of course, in our Kufutun, the Ancestral Jurisdictions, one of our 17 books, we prove how all those characters were manufactured and that they never existed in any form of any race. But we're not talking about fake religion. We're talking about real religion, the foundation of our culture. Religion animates the culture in the real sense. Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut, or African ancestral religion, is the only religion that exists, has ever existed, or ever will exist. Everything else is fake, perverted fragments of our culture. So when we're talking about real religion, which animates our ancestral culture, and our ancestral culture is the law or love of order and the divine hate or rejection of disorder, the expansive and contractive poles of our culture, of our ancestral culture, Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut ancestral culture, the divine acceptance or law or love of order, and divine rejection, divine hatred of disorder. When you accept what is orderly and reject what is disorderly, just like you breathe in the things that you need and you reject through your immune system the toxins that you don't need to maintain your life and sustain your life and so forth, that's what our culture or way of life is, the divine acceptance or law or love of order, the divine rejection or hatred of disorder and its purveyors. So when you're engaged in that process and you have a culture and you want to build institutions that further that, whether they're agricultural institutions, institutions of healing, curing disease, establishing healing centers, quote-unquote hospitals and so forth, a military structure, institutions, centers of governance, systems of governance and jurisprudence, manufacturing, homes on acquired land and other structures, manufacturing clothing and so forth. When you're engaged in the 7 principal values of nation building, restoration, Amansesew, when you talk about an institution, it's an institution of learning, of healing, of training, and so forth, they need to address every aspect of life. And when we're building these institutions, they impact every aspect of life in a tangible fashion. If you have a priest or priestess that can bring balance to a spiritually discordant person, someone with a behavioral or mental illness brought on by discordant energy coming from a discarnate spirit, they don't need medication and so forth, and Ambien and all these other different Risperdal and all this other nonsense. They can get realigned spiritually, reject those negative projections coming from discarnate entities and long-held conditionings and so forth. But then if they have a physical illness in relation to that spiritual illness as well, then the priest or priestesses also Odwirafo, they can go and get those herbs, that medicine, and heal the physical body of the person as well as the spiritual discord, the spiritual disalignment. And then, of course, the scribing, the writing, not only to, solidify that information, concretize that information that came from the spirit realm, you concretize it through the writing process, and also in that process, by virtue of that process, you're creating a miniature shrine, which is the scribing you've done yourself, but then to preserve that wisdom and pass it on and pass those protocols on so that people can recognize the value in the culture, our posterity. They see what you scribed, see what you wrote, see the value in it when they study it, and once they, as we talked about yesterday in another broadcast, once we value who we are, what our function in the world is, and what we have built, when we see its necessity, see its value, then we see its worth. We will seek to defend what we have built when we value what we have built, and then we will seek to perpetuate what we have built. And that scribing process is part of the perpetuation of what has been built. The valuing of what has been built, teaching that as well as the perpetuation of what has been built. So when they talk about the house of books and so forth, in the house of life, in the Per Ankh and everything else, it's not just talking about libraries and dictionaries and things like that, like the Library of Alexandria and so forth. It's not just compiling books just to, have some information out there. This is an extension of our ancestral religious culture, directed by the Abosom themselves. So this is what we're dealing with. Okay, before we go forward with that, we want to make sure we didn't miss. If you have any questions or comments on the phone line, you can hit the number 1. If you have any questions or comments in the chat room, of course, you must log in as a user in the chat room to interact in the chat room. So let me get to this one other section, then we're going to take this call on the phone line. We just wanted to talk about quickly, it says, as is only fit for an institution of learning, the deity Kunum or Kunwemu, the potter divinity, and the female divinity of writing Seshat, both bore the epithet of foremost of the house of life, foremost of the Per Ankh. There was a hall or a booth where offerings were presented to the divinities within the Per, within the sanctuary, among whom were Amen, Ra, Aset, Heru, and Sechima Sekhmet, the goddess divinity Ntorot of healing. A slaughterer was attached to the Per Ankh, who by slaughtering the animals through ritual animal sacrifice would increase the life force of the place or decrease evil by ritually butchering, sacrificing specific animals, and so forth. Priests were servants of the creator divinity Ra as well as Ra'at, guided by the divinity Ra as well as Ra'at. The house of life, here they will say, contains secret magical writings which they had composed or copied and which were said to have the power to renew and sustain life and further the rebirth of Al-Sard's annual festival. But they're not only talking about, publications with regard to every aspect of learning, medicine, science, math, true historical information, and everything else, but also the ritual practice, ritual incantation. When we sit down and have an oral transmission of culture, learning ritual songs, ritual prayers, ritual incantations of sorts, and so forth, we would also scribe those things as well for our posterity. That's not the only way we pass down the information. The primary means oral transmission of culture. But then the scribing can also be beneficial as well. So they're talking about not only the quote-unquote magical writings, but talking about ritual prayers, incantations, songs, and so forth, ritual practices, structures, whether it's funerary rituals and everything else, but at the same time talking about divination. So it's not magical secret, it's talking about, it's magical and secret to the whites and their offspring, but it's something commonplace and natural for us. All right, So, and there was one other section we want to get to before we get down there. Just give me 1 second. Actually, no, we'll go to the phone line real quick, and then we'll pull up that other section after. Okay, Michelle on the phone line, number 5808. You had a question or a comment?
Yes, Michelle.
What's up?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening. This may not be exactly on the topic of tonight, but since you mentioned divination, this has been a question that I've been wanting to ask for some time, and I'm glad that you mentioned that tonight. And that is whether or not you can recommend any divination methods for us, me in particular. I have so many questions, and I'm, cloudy on the answers that I think I'm getting, at my shrine. I've heard of water divination. I've heard of, shells, casting shells. But I understand that it depends on, one's bloodline and the, ethnic group to which they belong, which I'm still trying to find out. So, barring that, is there any recommendation that you can make for, divination to get, answers to questions that are
okay, so,
just,
and I understand very often people will have, just like, for example, in the Yoruba tradition, they'll have Obia divination that people engage in. Some other groups will talk about, some people have cards and different things, and they direct people to utilize different systems. Now, when you step back and look at different systems, the Yoruba people have the Obia that they came up with in their environment and based on what they were doing. Every group has their own different forms of divination, not just one form. Some more complex, some less complex, and so forth. So, but the first thing is we all come from a specific, group spiritually. We incarnated from a specific group, so we have a direct connection. There's a certain kind of divinatory practice that we will be naturally drawn to once we find out what that is. If we haven't already, engaged in it, not even realizing that was part of our ancestral culture. Conscious. So we always recommend first dealing simply when you establish, as soon as you begin to inquire, the term for divination, for example, in Akhan is adebisa. Bisa, the verb, bisa means to go, to ask or to inquire. So when somebody says, mere ko bisa, meaning I am going, mere, I am, mere, going, ko, bisa, to ask, to inquire. They're talking about I'm going to ask Yabosom, I'm going to the shrine of a divinity, questions to find out. So anytime you're asking, bisa, you're engaged in adebisa, things that are asked. You're engaged in inquiry that's oracular in and of itself, just to engage. As soon as you begin to desire to know from the Abosom what you need to know, you're already engaged in asking. You're operating in a divinatory capacity at that point. So the first thing we always say, of course, is establishing the relationship with your direct blood Nsamanfo at your ancestral shrine. And part of that asking, not only asking what specific group you are incarnate of, and asking for confirmation of that, which they will give you throughout the course of every day. They'll put you in position where you come in contact with people who will say things or show you things, whether they know why they're showing you or not. That confirms exactly what you were directed to see at the shrine and so forth, or hear, or you're directed to specific information that, was related to what you were asking about at the shrine. So asking them for confirmation of who you are, what group you're from, but then when you also have natural desires for certain kinds of ritual practices, sometimes that's a confirmation in and of itself, but you can always go back to them and ask, was that a confirmation of what you were trying to show me? You can always continuously ask for that confirmation, and they don't just give one confirmation. They'll give multiple confirmations in different ways. Sometimes people being placed in front of you, sometimes being directed to information that you otherwise weren't trying to go to, but they put you in a position to be directed to that information, whether it's on a computer or on the phone or, in just out in the world, wherever you are.
Right.
You're in a position to just happen to come across that information that confirms precisely what you were asking about. So, dealing with Untitled first, finding out or getting confirmation from them who you are, and finding out, once you find that out, what kinds of divinatory practices they engage in, or if it's not a great deal of information, what kinds of divinatory practices would be best for you. They may have shown you something already. They may have shown you, like some people, they've shown you some, or made you drawn to some cowrie shells, or made you drawn to some quote-unquote cockle shells or seashells, or made you drawn to some coconut shells or possum bones, like in hoodoo or whatever. They may have already put you in that kind of position, or water gazing, which is a major form of divination. Stones, some people gathering certain stones and holding them and being able to communicate, different ways, using mirrors, a number of different ways. So-called pendulums, which now people call them pendulums. In hoodoo, they're called the walking boy, which is a form of a pendulum. So now when people are using the pendulums, it's something we've been doing for thousands of years. So there's many different ways. You may have been drawn to a specific thing or will be pushed towards a specific thing. Then you have the presence of mind to say, wait a minute, are you pushing me towards this because this is the kind of practice I need to engage in? So it's always going back to confirm, and it's not offensive to the Untitled for you to ask for confirmation. They want you to ask for that so they can confirm it, so they can prove it to you, so you'll be firmly grounded in what they're showing you.
Okay. Yeah, it just interestingly, I went to on a vacation at Lake Michigan, and I picked up some mollusk shells, and I was just so anxious, like, oh, these would be great, to cast at my shrine. I got, I found 4 of them, and they would represent masculine and feminine, and I think I can use these. And when I got back home, I could not find them. I know exactly where I put them, and I still can't find them to this day. I don't know where they are. And to me, that the question is, was that indication that I should not be? That's not the way that I should, divine at my shrine. Those particular shells, those particular instruments.
Well, now the question, just like when you have that question, that's an inquiry. And the first thing you would do is you start wondering and questioning and projecting that inquiry out to the Untitled to see, was it a situation where they really weren't the shells, or was it a situation where you got the shells, you got the divinatory, implements, but there are certain things you needed to learn from the Untitled first before you jumped in and started using them. Maybe there were certain things you may have procrastinated with, they were trying to get you to engage in or get consistent with first before you began to use them, because sometimes people get shells, they get taught how to use them, they go sit with the priest and tell them everything about what one's going up and down and what it means in the name of everything else. But there are things that they haven't really aligned with their Untitled, their Egungun, and so forth yet, to the extent that you don't get to the point where they're just casting shells and any kind of pattern is coming up and they're just memorizing stuff and they're getting things half wrong and half right, using everything else without having a firm grounding within Untitled. So sometimes they will give a system and they, you won't use it immediately. There are certain things you have to learn first. Just like somebody's going to be trained as a priest or priestess, they can get initiated, but that's just like an admission into a college. But then you don't graduate until years later. Once you graduate and get a degree, then you start utilizing the degree in the field. In the same fashion, sometimes they will give us what we need to let us know this is what you are striving for. You're not to use them immediately. And we talked about our Ade Visa system when they gave us those, what are those shells and so forth. It was a number of years before we were able to use them in the capacity that they wanted us to use them, because there were certain things we needed to know. It was a number of years.
Oh, really?
Actually, over 15 years before we use them. Now,
really?
that's a different case. I'm not saying at all that every time somebody gets some shells, they're going to have to wait 15 years to use them. That's not what we're saying.
I understand. So, yeah, I understand.
But just as an example, it wasn't an immediate thing. There were certain things we needed to know before we could begin to utilize them in the capacity that they wanted us to utilize them. So the question would be, you would ask them for confirmation. First of all, how were you directed, put into position to find them? Did they put you in that position to get those shells, which most likely they probably did? So then what is the nature of the usage of them, and what is that time frame? What do you need in order to use? Because you may have a certain mindset of, well, this is the way certain groups do it. It's probably similar, so I'm going to do it the same way. There may be a totally different manner in which you utilize it. It may not be a casting of them up and down. It may simply be holding them. As soon as you hold them, the spirit comes to you. It may just be that. So it just depends on, how they are to be used. So you have to let them guide that process.
Okay. Okay, well, I feel a little better now that you've explained it that way.
Okay.
I was just so anxious.
Right. No, I understand.
Right.
So, you always go back to confirmation. Any question you have going back to confirmation, they're not going to be weary of you, asking detailed questions over and over just to make sure.
Right. Okay. Gracias.
Okay. Okay. And before we go to that next section, we have one more call, and then we're going to get to that next section. Then we're going to talk about application. Even though we talked about some of the applications of these, the house of life and how it manifests in our culture today, we're going to get even further into detail talking about our institutions of learning and healing and training and employment and entrepreneurship founded upon these principles that we, for example, our AKONGUASUA institution that we have already founded, and all the books that we've published, 17 books, and the various workshops we do on substance abuse abstinence and domestic abuse neutralization and overcoming intergenerational trauma and transcarnational trauma and so forth, and Afurakanu manhood, and the training for human services professionals to incorporate culture into therapeutic interventions with their clients. All of these things are born out of our institution, AKONGUASUA, and is founded upon these kinds of principles, so we're going to get into that. Okay, so on the phone line, Bichiawo number 5580, you have a question or a comment?
Yes. How can we get this program over to our communities about building up soldiers in our communities to stop this police brutality?
Yes. So the question you said, how do we utilize the program to build up soldiers in the community to stop the violence, stop the police brutality?
Yes.
Okay. So now, if you look on we have some information. If you look, for example, number one, our ODWIRA Afurakanu Manhood book. We have a publication. The book is a free download. All 17 of our books we make available as free downloads. We have softcover versions of our books as well that can be purchased between $8 and $11, but the ebook versions are all free. So whether people have money or not, they can access the book. We also have, based on that book, we have an Afurakanu Manhood training workshop, but we also put that workshop on video to our workshop, and we have that posted as well. So even if somebody couldn't attend a workshop where we go through that entire manhood book, the Manual for Manhood, 7 Principal Values of Manhood, that has transformed many lives of young males as well as adults around the country since we published that book, and it's happening every day. Even if they could not come to a workshop, they have the 2-hour, in fact, a couple of videos, as a matter of fact, where we go throughout the book, dissecting it bit by bit so that you can gain a full understanding. So that's the first piece. And the same thing, of course, with females, but just dealing with the males right now. Transforming them so they can return to proper notions of what manhood is, who we are, what our function in the world is, and of course, through that process, you also understand who your enemies are, the whites and their offspring. and their culture and their faith religion. So when you have that understanding, it's rooted in divine order, which is divine law and divine hate. Hate is divine, law or love is divine. They are two poles of divine order. Through law, you accept or bring in or incorporate things that you need to function harmoniously in the world: food, clothing, shelter, security, building institutions, all kinds of things. But then through divine hate, you reject your immune system. You reject those individuals and entities who would otherwise destroy your community. So when you have that foundational understanding and you purge yourself from these fake religions, these fictional cartoon characters, and this turn the other cheek, loving everybody and accepting all and all that nonsense, which is political, criminal propaganda to destroy the minds of our people, when we return to our ancestral religious practices, we return to divine order, which is comprised again of divine law or love and divine hate. They are deities of law and balance. They are male and female deities of divine hate. They're the immune system within our structure. So when people have a proper notion of who they are, then they transform themselves physically, they transform their mindset, they transform their focus, they transform their discipline, they transform their diet, they transform their activity, their behavior. They go from being self-destructive to constructive. Then they connect with other individuals who are engaged in the same process. And then you have a collective individuals who are on the same page. It doesn't have to be 100% of our people. We don't have to get 100% of our people. All we need is the immune system cells within the community. It's like the immune system in your body is 1 out of 14 major systems. That's the one that's going to fight the cancerous cells. Everybody else is not fighting the cancer cells. All you need to do is get to that 1 out of 14. You don't have to get to everybody. We waste time trying to get to every single person, but we'll never get to everybody. And the cracker knows that, so he promotes that nonsense like, well, we have to have 100% unity or we can't move forward. That's nonsense. So all we need is that small percentage. Get to the immune system cells, fighters, the born killers, and so forth. Transform the minds of the people, and the people who are on the same page form those collectives, and then they can move forward in structured ways. Now, we did a 7-part series dealing specifically with the police brutality and the anti-police brutality. And we talked about fundamentally police brutality will end through police brutality. When the police begin to get brutalized, then that will end police brutality. So we did a 7-part series on that, founded in our culture, but it starts off with transforming, the individual transforming themselves, their focus, their attention, their behavior, going from being self-destructive to constructive, then restructuring their steps. So we go into all of that in the Afurakanu Manhood book in detail, and then we have the workshop that they can download the video of that as well in companion with the book so they can study that. There are people who, having study groups around that, transforming young men who were engaged in some nonsensical behavior, and they're transforming them back into normal, productive behavior and so forth, and beginning to form these kinds of collectives. So, and if you look on the website, and if you want to email us, we can send you direct links to that as well.
Hey, that's a good answer. I like your answer. I listen to those programs when you deal with the police brutality, and I think you have the best teaching, the best solutions for our community of anybody out there.
Okay, Medase, I appreciate that. Appreciate supporting. Appreciate you checking out the information and sharing the information.
Yes, I stay in touch. I love your teaching. I love how you detail it. Your answers are very common sense and very practical for our people. And I get told I'm very secretive. And in some cases, that's true because I can't tell everybody what my intention, what my purpose. Because our people don't use common sense when it comes to solving their solutions to that problem in their community. They don't know. They all want to take ownership for leadership, calling themselves leaders, instead of doing the work, So it's hard for me to tell people what I'm thinking because we're in a dangerous position as a people So we don't need to be doing a whole lot of talking. We just need to do. And I like your teachings on the long walk. That kind of went with my spirit. I kind of operate like that, like the long walk.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. And people have different ways of operating. We've been conditioned not to embrace common sense. We're gripped with fear. And at the same time, that fear manifests as trying to be, a messianic nationalist, the one man who's going to lead people to the promised land. But at the same time, we're not going to engage the cracker directly because we're too scared. So they come up with some kind of impotent, philosophy, whether God is going to kill the white man on the spaceship or some nonsense, or we just need to fight them with political, electoral politics, all that kind of nonsense, which is rooted in fear. So then we're conditioned with fear and a lack of common sense. So, we have to move beyond that and get back to normal. And when we get back to normal, then these solutions are there. We've just been abnormal for so long that something basic and sensible seems like it's out of the question. We don't even consider it. So we just have to get back to normal.
Yes, people forget that the white man conditioned our thinking. Sometimes we think we have our own thinking. It's not our thinking. We've been conditioned to think the way we do, and that's why we can't solve our problems. I've always rejected everybody's opinion about slavery, about what happened in slavery. I don't accept that. I don't allow someone to tell me about my own people. I let my people tell me. Either I find the information myself or else I don't listen to anybody. Because I can get the answer if I need the answer, but I'm not going to get it from my enemies, whether they know it or not. I don't want anything from them.
Right. Exactly.
I don't want my mind to be confused. Listen to the enemy of my people, Because I had a teacher in college. He was teaching on black history. He was saying that all of my people were slaves. I said, no, not all people were slaves. I said, for example, if I know you was coming to make a slave out of me, I said, guess what? You be the first one I kill. I told the teacher that. So I'm saying, if I'm thinking this way, I said, there's no way that I'm any different from my people who were back then. So if a slave died fighting for his freedom, he was never a slave. You can't call that man a slave. He died fighting for his freedom, so he was never a slave. So if you try to make a slave out of me, I'm going to kill you first, and you might kill me, but I didn't die a slave. You can't call me a slave because I tried to kill you knowing that you was trying to enslave me.
Absolutely. Right.
So
they were showing their freedom.
The teacher told me, he said, well, I guess it's a dark day. I said, no, it's not a dark day. I said, if it's a dark day, it's a good day. I said, it's a bad day because you told a white lie. That's what I told the teacher. And I was just out of high school when I told him that. But I've always had that fiery nature like that, I just didn't see the point of sitting in front of a white man telling me about my people.
Exactly.
I don't want to hear it from him. If I want to hear my story, I'm gonna hear it from my people.
No, I understand definitely. That's natural conversation.
I don't know anybody that's got a more solid teaching and more profound and correct information than you have. Because I've been listening to you for a while, and everything you have is on point. Everything.
Okay, well, we really appreciate that. We put that work in. We're trying to connect with, as many of our people as possible, so we really appreciate that support.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I'll say appreciate that call. Okay, so we're going to want to get back up to that section, still dealing with the House of Life, and then we're going to bring, the manifestation of that into some more detail as we manifest that in our structures today, in our institutions today. So, give me 1 second. I want to pull that information up real quick. and we're just pulling it up. In the meantime, you can go to the AKONGUASUA link that we placed in the chat room on the Odwirafo website. So here's another section of the Per Ankh, so-called House of Life. Copying old books was one of the main reasons and functions within the Per Ankh, but not just old books, talking about manuscripts and so forth. The so-called Per Ankh, so-called books of the dead, were since the so-called New Kingdom among the most often reproduced pieces of writing. And again, when we talk about the books of the dead, these are not just scriptures, but we're talking about ritual practices that are utilized for the benefit of our people. When people make transition, and if they don't make a smooth transition, what impact does that have on society? This is something that they don't teach you through the pseudo-Egyptological text. Why would we have funerary practices? Sound funerary practices promote a more harmonious society. Because if someone doesn't make a smooth transition to the ancestral realm and they become earthbound and they're depressed and anxious and so forth, then they begin to press on their living relatives and other non-relatives who are still living in the physical world, causing depression, anxiety, distraction, causing car crashes, and by distracting people for a few seconds and causing problems with people having, depression and anxiety and paranoia and everything else, because those spirits are having those things. So when you have a backlog of spirits hanging around because they're depressed and they didn't make a smooth transition to the ancestral realm, then they're impacting adults as well as children. And when you have that kind of thing going on, it creates chaos within the society. And then that's just for the people who are depressed. What about those who are criminal elements within the society who make their transition? And they're child molesters and everything else, and they're criminal spirits like that. They're trying to negatively influence children as well as adults in a perverse fashion. But when you have a backlog of such spirits, ancestral spirits, this kind of wayward, then that causes discordance in society. When you have sound funerary practices, you can remove that backlog. When we have a sound priesthood, you can remove that backlog, and the pressure off of thousands of people, even millions of people, is released, alleviated, lifted overnight. All that pressure and anxiety and darkness in a negative sense, blindness in a negative sense that people were feeling is lifted from them, and they can move forward. They don't feel shackled. They can move forward in a more free, prosperous, and healthy way. So when you talk about the Per Ankh, all of that is connected with that. So when we're copying these texts, there's a reason for copying these texts, not just about, having a bunch of books and being intellectual. They are functional. So we're reproducing these books. The scribes were experts in matters of religious and ritual practices, and a number of different things. Apart from working in the scriptorium itself, scriptorium, simply talking before there's a movable printing press, the way that we reproduce books and distributed books and scripts and so forth was through people simply having to copy them down by hand and having many people doing them at the same time, or however many people you could get together and train to do that. So they had to reproduce these symbols faithfully and these books faithfully, and they had to copy the entire book, create a new book, and continue to engage in that process. So that's what they're talking about with regard to the scriptorium. So apart from working in the scriptorium, the houses, the Per Ankh scribes were also commissioned to compose inscriptions and outline them in tombs, on statues, on stela, for the artisans to carve or paint in. And then they have a quote, a forebearer of the 6th century BCE priest, Edise, wanted to erect some stelae in his hometown. And then they give the specific quote. It says, quote, he went through the Southland inspecting. He reached Abu, which is Elephantine. He had cut a stela of the stone of Abu Elephantine in 2 blocks, a statue of the VMG stone. He had them brought to Tujoy, which is his hometown. He sent for the masons, the sculptors, the scribes of the Per Ankh, the House of Life, and the draughtsmen. He had them write on the stela all the favors he had lavished on Tedroy of his hometown. So he's talking about commissioning these Seshu, these scribes, Seshu scribes, to come out and scribe on the stone structures on the stela and so forth, the messages that he wanted to leave for his posterity to show us, not only his immediate posterity, but to show us as well, thousands of years later, what was taking place, what was happening in the culture. When we see what was taking place, then we begin to value the culture. We recognize the value in it. We recognize the worth in it. We seek to defend it, seek to protect it, seek to perpetuate it, and reinstitutionalize it, seek to replicate it within our own lives. Because we see value, we see its benefit, we see its utility. So now when we look at our institution, which is based on that, and it's a model for other institutions as well, AKONGUASUA, which is the name of our institution, and we talked about this in a couple of our broadcasts. So we go to the AKONGUASUA page on our website. And let me put the link in the chat room real quick. That real quick in there. Okay, we put the link in the chat room. So when you look at the AKONGUASUA link on our site, we talk about AKONGUASUA. Akongua is a descriptive title of Gua, which means a chair or seat in the Akhan tradition. Suya means to learn. AKONGUASUA means learning from the ancestral seat. AKONGUASUA is the major institution, central institution of learning within the Nation in North America. Talk about the definition of the term, the basis of instruction within our institution, the various publications, 17 books we've published, over 60 articles. We have 189 broadcasts. We have a number of other videos as well from the Ustream broadcast, that are separate from the Blog Talk Radio broadcast and webcast that we did in Ma'akaru a number of years ago, as well as the most recent stuff. We began our institution in 2001 in Chicago. We're from Chicago. We just moved to D.C. a few years back. We've been in D.C. actually 6 years. So our institution, training, broadcasts, workshops, entrepreneurial program is all born of AKONGUASUA, our institution. So what we are working on now, of course, is establishing a physical space for our institution, AKONGUASUA Dain. Again, Dain means a sanctuary, a space. So AKONGUASUA Dain will be the physical space, the Dain, the sanctuary, the temple, quote unquote, for the sanctuary Dain of AKONGUASUA, of our institution of learning. And when we establish the space, we'll be able to expand our services to the community. So we'll continue the broadcast 3 days a week. We'll be live streaming from the institution. We will expand our class offerings to the community, including classes on language and so forth, the Akhan language, the language of ancient Kamit, reading and writing language and so forth. But we will also have our workshops. We'll be able to have those on a regular basis within the institution. Akumasa, substance abuse abstinence within the Afuraitkaitnut community. We have a ritual method for that so that our people can overcome substance abuse addictions through the practice of ancestral culture. Already have that method, and many people have been able to overcome alcohol and marijuana and other drug addiction through Akumasa and the Kum method that we have for that. We have a workshop with regard to that as well. Akuma Dain, overcoming domestic abuse, the negative effects of domestic abuse. People get trapped into suffering from that and can't climb out of it, and they make bad decisions and self-destructive decisions and so forth because they've been conditioned. Through our ancestral culture, we can assist people with overcoming that. We have workshops dealing with that and so forth. Akuma Tra, overcoming transcarnational trauma, intergenerational trauma and suffering and so forth. People have suffered things intergenerationally in the family as well as transcarnationally, bringing those things into their lives as adults and suffering on a regular basis, and that leads to all kind of self-destructive behavior and relationships that can be overcome. All of these things can be overcome. So we have workshops dealing with that. We have the Oberima Afurakanu Manhood workshops based on our book, Afurakanu Manhood, for young males as well as adults to come be transformed. We can reach them wherever they are in the world, right where they are right now. This is why we release the books for free and the videos for free, because all it takes is one reading of the book or one listening of that to the video and so forth, transforming the lives of the young male or the older male. They were engaged in self-destructive activity, behavior and so forth, self-destructive mindset. One reading of Oberima Afurakani Manhood transforms that, and they want to focus and get their mind back on something intelligent and productive. And we cover it's a holistic approach, a 7-part, 7-chapter book based on the 7 principal values of Oberima Afurakani Manhood, a holistic set of 7 principles governed by the Abosom that govern the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies which animate our 7-day week, and also govern our chronobiological cycle, the circumception cycle, the 7-day cycle. So every 7 days is a new cycle on the planet, but also within our biology. And we have a specific set of 7 principles that are connected to that 7-day cycle. So every day of the week, another principle you have to focus on. The energy that governs that principle is also in the environment, literally. So you have assistance from the forces in nature to align with that principal value of Oberima every day of the week. And the Ebe, the proverbial wisdom associated with that, and all the ramifications of that is an Afurakani man, leading to productive behavior. So one listen of that, we can reach them right where they are right now. They don't need money. They can get on their cell phone, download the book, get on YouTube, download the video and so forth, and transform themselves right where they are right now. We do not have to wait for the building of an institution to reach every Afurakani male in the country as well as outside the country. So we have those workshops we've been doing. We published the book back in 2008. We've been doing that since 2008. And we will continue with that, of course. We have our Sankofa Juma training behavioral health, human services agents, whether they're psychologists, therapists, social workers, case managers, community support workers, crisis-based intervention workers, teachers, people who are working, after-school programs, groups, at-risk youth, behavioral health programs, therapeutic foster care, whatever it is, whatever capacity you're working in, there are ways to introduce and incorporate culture into your therapeutic interventions with your clients so you can serve the whole of the person, physical soundness and spiritual soundness from the center of culture. So we published the Nkwamwa Whole Life Journal, which is part of the manual for that. And we have an Akura Whole Life Intervention therapeutic model that we teach the human services agents how to implement. And we put that on video as well, so you can download the book, you can download the materials for the training right from the website, the sankopajuma.com website, talking about incorporating culture within the treatment plan, your individual treatment plans in the cultural spiritual domain. There's always a cultural spiritual domain on the treatment plans as an option. We show you how to utilize that cultural spiritual domain in your therapeutic interventions with your clients, utilize them effectively to transform the clients fully, because if you do not use that cultural spiritual domain, then you're really not addressing the whole wholeness of your client. You're not really addressing the whole person. So there are ways to utilize that cultural spiritual domain to fully serve your client, but at the same time, for billing purposes, to capture those interventions on progress notes and so forth in an effective way for your employer or for your practice, your business practice, your independent, but also for your funding sources and so forth. You have to capture those interventions, and you can do that because you can show the kind of work that you're doing with the client and show their improvement rooted in that cultural approach. So those trainings we have, that's on video as well. You can download all the documents, the books, the training documents, as well as the video to go with that. We'll be able to expand all of these trainings. So part of the AKONGUASUA, DINE, the institution, one aspect of it is Nkom, which is ritual and healing. Another aspect of it is Adesua, classes, trainings, workshops, lectures. The other section is publishing, distribution, employment, entrepreneurship. All of these things we already have going. We've been having them going for years. We simply want to establish a physical space so we can expand our services to the community, serve the community at a greater capacity. Classes we have now, they will be expanded. The workshops that we do now, they will be expanded so we can reach more people. The publishing, distribution, employment, and entrepreneurship, we publish in-house on our own printers in color already. When we have the center, we can move that operation into the center and expand it. When people are ordering books, we have people working to do the copying, the printing, the cutting, the folding, the binding and everything else, and the shipping. So we will have employment opportunities there. That's an expansive thing that will tangibly benefit our people. But we also have right now already in operation the Odwirafo distributor option. So if you would like to make money immediately, you can become a distributor of our soft cover books. We have 17 books out now. They range between $8 and $11 retail. You purchase them wholesale for 30% off, and then you sell them retail. So therefore, the books themselves are cheap retail, between $8 and $11. Most of them are $9 or $10. So when you're selling them to friends, coworkers, family members, people you work with, and so forth, you'll see a book is only $9 or $10, but it's talking about Jesus never existed in detail, or talking about the origin of the term yoga, or more means dead, or Ubin Shane talking about our ritual practices, or hoodoo people showing that the Akhan religion coming from ancient Kanat Nubia to West Afuraitkaitnut was carried into North America, and that is what hoodoo is. So all of these books and many more, cheap as well, so they sell themselves. So if you would like to generate income, you can become a distributor, purchase wholesale, you sell them retail. You are independent. You are not working for us. You're working for yourself as an independent entrepreneur. We already have that process going. So any of our people can begin that process. It doesn't matter what your previous work history is. So we talk about this kind of information. We need to be able to show tangible benefits, immediate tangible benefits from what we are talking about. And we can show that with our AKONGUASUA substance abuse abstinence operation and program, the KUM method, ritual method for that. We can show that with our Odwirafo distributor option, so people can begin to generate income immediately just by connecting with ancestral culture, ancestral religion. There's a direct benefit. You get the information out to our people and help them to transform their lives. We've had people read one reading of our publication on Abatun, melanin, and marijuana, showing how marijuana is destructive to melanin-dominant people because of the chemical structure of marijuana as well as melanin. One reading of that, they stopped smoking marijuana. Of course, they're enhancing their health. They're not destroying their lungs and their brain cells and so forth. They're not wasting money. They're not putting themselves in position to possibly be arrested and so forth. Being drug tested at work and, getting fired or not being able to get employment because of their own drugs and so forth. All these various things they can avoid because they clean themselves up from one reading. So we talk about these different things in our publications. People transform their lives from reading the publications for the better, the betterment of themselves, saving money, not wasting money on self-destructive things, reallocating those funds towards black businesses. It benefits the community. It's because people read our books, the benefits of the black business, because people start thinking in the terms of cooperative economics, because they start thinking in terms of being Afuraitkaitnut people, understanding their identity. So it benefits them, it benefits their health, benefits their relationship with their children and significant others, family members, and so forth. It benefits the wider Afuraitkaitnut community and businesses within the community. There's a tangible benefit. And there's you who are selling the books, of course, you not only participate in that tangible benefit for the community, but there's a tangible benefit for you because you're generating income for yourself as an independent entrepreneur, and you're also, promoting that entrepreneurial endeavor, that spirit. So people see what you're doing, and then they're stimulated to become entrepreneurs as well. So all these things are taking place. Tangible, direct benefits. You're able to take care of yourself at a higher capacity, and you're also positively impacting the community. You're doing something that's positive. So that's dealing with the NHOMA side, the publishing, distribution, employment, and entrepreneurship. The ODWIRA side, the various classes, trainings, workshops, lectures, presentations. We'll also be doing some documentaries and so forth, which will also lead to more employment for our people who are cinematographers, people who are engaged in a great deal of time marketing and getting that information out to our people in a positive, culturally grounded fashion, that kind of marketing. But that just gets the word out to more people, and more people who get the information and will get the documentaries, the more people who are transform the lives of their children. They begin to form these collectives that we were talking about, study group collectives, as we have on our website, the Nanason Ancestral Religion Study Groups. You can form those. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And then out of those kinds of collectives, because people are studying the same kind of information, they're strengthening one another, then they start looking for ways to serve their needs. And when a number of people get together and they're studying that kind of information, they transform their lives, then they recognize, hey, I want to pull my children out of these white schools. And since they're a collective now, one of the people in the collective can say, well, I'll stop working at my job. You send your children to me. I'm going to start a homeschool collective or homeschool, whatever, Afuraitkaitnut school. Everybody can send their children to that person's school. And now you have another black business that was born. You also have your children being taken care of in a, positive fashion. Everything is a win-win situation across the board. And the same thing with other kinds of stores, whether it's health food stores, healing centers, different other kinds of stores, or engineering, IT, whatever we need, we start looking in that direction, begin to produce whatever we need for ourselves within the collective. The collectives support one another. So it's an outgrowth. It's a domino effect of nation building, Amansesew, nation restoration. So these are the tangible benefits that are realized through AKONGUASUA dying. So we have our institution. It is founded upon those principles. When you look at the ritual section, we have a Kwesi Adai, a Wuku Adai. We just had our Hoodoo Mine Festival on October 17th in Washington, D.C. It was the first annual Hoodoo Nation Festival. We had a number of vendors come out all day. We had presenters talking about different aspects of ancestral religion and culture. So we had trade and commerce going on. We had people coming out. It was a free event. We were able to give away a free copy of our new book, Hoodoo Mind, the Hoodoo Mind Journal, to everyone who came to the event. They were able to interact, network, share information, share resources, and so forth, become empowered, and go home and empower their friends, family, and so forth. And then it's a chain reaction, and more people are studying. So we just had that event. We will be in Alabama this Saturday doing the presentation on Kukutuntun, the ancestral jurisdiction. On November 15th, we'll be back in D.C. doing a presentation on our Kokobo movement, eradicating dissexuality, homosexuality from the Afuraitkaitnut community through ancestral religion. And we're going to be talking about our book, Kokobo, proving that dissexuality, homosexuality was never accepted in ancient Kamit, where we go through these various texts, giving the proper translation of these texts, where the white Spring had sought to insert dissexuality in ancient texts of Kamit where it doesn't exist. So we expose their lies. We prove that conclusively. So we're going to be going through that book, as well as dealing with how these discarnate ancestral spirits and non-ancestral spirits will influence children who are receptive, as well as adults who have been through some traumatic experiences, trying to push them towards perverse sexually deviant behavior. When our people feel those pushes, they assume those pushes or those influences are their own thoughts. In reality, they're not. But when they engage their own ancestresses and ancestors through their own ancestral religious practice, they can repel those perverse spirits immediately, and those perverse desires are gone immediately and permanently because they were not the person's desires in the first place. But we're talking about the eradication of dissexuality, homosexuality from the Afuraitkaitnut community through ancestral religion. Of course, the whites in our spring are waging that dissexual war against our people because they seek to destroy our families, which they will not do because we will not allow that. So they are going to be the ones who are destroyed, not us. So that's part of the process. So we have these different, when you look on the section, the Unkom section, so we have the ritual and healing aspect of the AKONGUASUA institution. We have the ODWIRA aspect of the institution, classes, workshops, training, presentations, and so forth. And then we have the NHOMA, the publishing, distribution, employment, and entrepreneurship. This is what we call AKONGUASUA, our institution of learning, healing, training, employment, and entrepreneurship, impacting our people right where they are right now, tangibly and effectively. So we have, we started a fundraising campaign for the institution last year, around this time last year, in November of last year. We've had 76 donors. We're at 14% of our goal. We have a few thousand Facebook friends. We have hundreds of people on our network, people who tune into the show. We have people, some of you have clicked follow. You follow and subscribe to the show here on Blog Talk Radio. I have a couple of thousand people who have, subscribe to us on YouTube as well. So to reach our goal, if we just had 500 people out of those 1,000, 5,000 plus people and so forth, 500 people who made a purchase or a contribution of $40 to our institution, we will raise the funds overnight to open the institution. So we do have, out of our 17 books, we do have an option for the first 5 books. It's 20% off. So instead of the first 5 books being $50 for the entire 5-book set, the first 5 books in our curriculum, you can get the first 5 books for $40. And we have that permanent option on the website. Any order of 10 books or more, like the whole 17-book set, is automatically 30% off. Or 10 books, any 10 books, 30% off. Any 11 books, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 30% off. So the first 5 that are foundational are 20% off. So the first 5 books are $40. So whether you purchase the first 5 books or you made a $40 donation, if 500 of our people did that, we just did the math, and that would be enough for us to open this center. And we have the capacity to do that because we are reaching many people. This past year, 12-month cycle from September, because our years begin on the autumn equinox, September 23rd this year. That was our first day of 13,016. This past year, we had 1.34 million hits on our website. Previous year was 1.1 million. The year before that, it was 472,000. So we've been exponentially increasing with regard to the word getting out. So in that vein, we have millions of hits. That means we have thousands of people, of course, who are going to the site and sometimes returning a number of times. And within those thousands, within just a few hundred, we have enough people who are committed and focused to not just share the information, but actually engage the process. Whether you purchase 1 or more books, you don't have to purchase 5, of course. You can purchase one $8 book, that's fine. Any donation, any purchase is helpful to what we do. So if you have benefited from the work, and if you see the value in the work, please make a donation. We're working to establish that institution as soon as possible. In reality, that could happen very soon because, again, like for example, we put out the video. We did a video trailer, 6-minute trailer talking about the 5 books for $40, and we talked about the 5 books. Kukum, the ancestral jurisdiction. Uben Shane talking about our ritual practices, the ancestral summon. Afuraitkaitnut, the origin of the term Africa, where we prove that term comes directly from Afuraitkaitnut. We show that in the Medusa, the hieroglyphs. We're the first to show that. Maranechi, divine law, love and divine hate, the 2 poles of divine order. And we go into detail to prove that in that publication. The Okra complex, the soul of Akhan, where we talk about the nature of the soul, the divine consciousness, the divinity dwelling in the head region, Afuraitkaitnut people. So those first 5 books, we just did a trailer on that, 6-minute trailer. It's like kind of like a movie commercial trailer, talking about those 5 books, describing them, and showing also that the first 5 are 20% off 5 books for $40. So we just did that. But when we put that trailer out on Friday, this past Friday, on YouTube, That was like Friday afternoon, evening. And so by today, when we look today, earlier in the day, a few days later, 4 days later, we already had over 3,000 views for that video. And a lot of people liked the video and shared the video and so forth. So out of 3,000 people within a few days, as well as thousands of people, when we just talked about the police brutality information, when we put those videos out, when you look on our YouTube page, that one is close to 30,000 views for that particular set of video. So we have enough people actually viewing the information, but when you move forward, if you see value in the information, I say we thank you for sharing and liking, but those who see value and want to see the institution come into fruition, make a donation or purchase one or more of our books, or if you'd like to become a distributor of our books so you can make money yourself. You can purchase the books as a distributor, sell them, you make your money back as well as, a profit. So no matter what it is, anybody who makes a donation of $15 or more, you have the option of receiving one or more of our books in return for your donation. So it's not just a free donation. You can receive books in return for that, so it's like a purchase in that sense. So you'll get the immediate benefit from your donation by receiving one or more of our books, and then the longer-term benefit is the fact that you invested in an institution that's actually opening, and then you can benefit from it from the live classes because all of our classes are free. All of the workshops we do in different cities, we do not charge an admission fee for people to come out and hear us. All of our 17 books in the ebook formats are free. And then we give away a free copy of one of our softcover books to everybody who attends our events with the help of the community. So there's a tangible benefit, immediate, a tangible benefit long-term when the institution opens and you can participate. You can become a distributor. You can learn how to conduct some of these workshops, like the ODWIRA Afurakanu manhood workshop, and conduct them within your locale. And then some people, as we said in one of the notices we sent out, you have many nonprofit organizations that work with at-risk youth, and they want people to come in and do groups once a week, or once every other week, or sometimes once a day, or a couple of times a week. And they see that the people who are African-centered and about the community, very often the Black nationalists, Pan-Africans, and so forth, they have rites of passage programs where they have some kind of cultural approach that actually grabs the people where other people could not get to them just using regular pseudo-psychology and silly therapeutic techniques and so forth. But the people who are culturally grounded, they seem to be able to connect with the people. So they will call people out and say, well, listen, if you come in once a week, we'll pay you $100 every time you do a group. We'll pay you $50 every time you do a group. You go to 5 different agencies, you get $50 or $100 a day, and then you make some money every day just from 1 hour of work. Because you went through, for example, the Odwirafo Afurakanu manhood training or the Ptah training workshop. You have that 7-module curriculum that's designed to be implemented within 7 40-minute sessions. And you can use that curriculum, that's what it's designed for, to work with your clients one-on-one or with a group and so forth. You can do the same thing with the Akuma substance abuse abstinence. You can do the same thing with the Odwirafo Afurakanu manhood. So there's a tangible benefit, once again, immediate, because you can utilize that information, employ yourself by utilizing the workshops and the publications that we have put out and the curriculums we put out. Long term, the benefit, of course, is the benefit for the community because we have a center that offers these trainings. So whatever we have, you can see a direct line to a direct benefit immediately as well as long term for yourself as well as the community. Well, and we only have actually a few minutes left in the broadcast. I want to check the chat room real quick to make sure we didn't miss anything. But, so we are trying to do a couple of things. Number one, open the center as soon as possible, but also your donation or public purchase of one or more of our books also is what allows us to be able to give away the free copy. So, for example, when we do the presentation this weekend, as well as in D.C., presentation this weekend in Alabama, the presentation in D.C. the following week. We're also working on a presentation in Atlanta later in November at the end of the month. When we go to these different places, as we said, presentations are free. People can come in for free. We do not charge organizers of our events speakers fee. Like some people say, well, you got to pay me $1,500 to come out there and speak. We don't charge a speaker's fee. And we don't charge an admissions fee to the people who come out to hear us speak. And we also give them a free copy of one of our books. The only way we can do that is when people make purchases of books or they make a donation. Then we send your books out and everything, but then we can set aside a small percentage of the funds to print out an extra book. And then if a number of people make purchases, we can print out a number of books, and the next thing you know, over the course of a number of weeks, we can have 20 or 25 books, and we can go to a presentation or 30 books, and then we can give away 30 free books simply because people supported what we're doing. Part of the Cocoa Bowl movement, talking about our book, Cocoa Bowl, and the bisexuality, homosexuality was never accepted in ancient Kemetic. We proved that and showed the divine prohibition against bisexuality in the Per Ankh, the so-called papyrus of Ani. Our people need to know that information. We want that book in the hands of every Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut person. We would like to give away a free softcover version to as many black people as possible. We're going to do that at the event, but we would like to give away more than just at the event. Every black person should have a book proving through the hieroglyphs and Medusa and ancestral culture in general that we have never accepted this sexuality because it is against divine order, it's perverse, it is insane, and we have documented evidence of that, as well as just our culture in general. So we have details about that in the book. Youth as well as adults need to have that book. So we would like to give away as many of those as possible. So that as well as, and that's part of our institutional approach as well. So anytime, again, you make any purchase, donation, is going towards feeding the community, giving these softcover books out. Crackers give away free copies of the Bible every single day. There are free copies of the Quran being given out to brainwash our people every day. These Jehovah's Witnesses are riding around or walking around giving away free pamphlets and foolish books every day. You have Mormons going around giving away these free pamphlets and this nonsense every day to our people. We need to be getting in the hands of our people free publications that are real, have real information, and the only way we can do that is with the support of the community at this point. So, Yedase, for those who have some people made some donations today. We'll be sending those books out. Some people just wanted to make a donation without receiving the book, or they already purchased the books, but they just wanted to support Yedase for that. Those who would like the books, we'll send those out. But if you would like to make a contribution, even for the books that we're trying to give away free books this weekend, this Saturday in Montgomery, Alabama, we'd like to give away free books at that event as well. So your donation will assist us in giving away free books there as well. So you can go to the NHOMA page, the publications page on our website, or the AKONGUASUA page. You'll see the donation button as well as the GoFundMe campaign and so forth. And Yedase for those who have contributed and who will contribute, and for sharing the information, but also contributing. Sometimes people see the work that we're doing, they like the work that we're doing, they think it's great, and they see the video, or they see the books, and they see the 17 books and everything, and they say, this is really great information. They like it, and then they share it, to their contacts on Facebook because they want to get the word out. But they assume that, people will, once they see it, they're like, oh, this is wonderful, and they'll get the information. Sometimes what happens is people have the same mindset. They see it, they look at the books, they're like, man, this looks like a great set of books. I need to share this, and they share it to somebody else, and then we get thousands of shares. But people don't realize that nobody actually accessed the book. They just shared the information. They assumed that the next person was going to purchase because they shared it, but the next person saw it was great, and they said, well, I know the next person will purchase, and they'll share it, and it circulates in a great capacity, but then people haven't actually accessed the information. So at the end of the day, they didn't have the information. They just shared. They liked what they saw, and they shared. So we appreciate the sharing, but also if you would like the softcover version, now remember the ebook versions are free, so you can download those at any time, all of them. But then if you'd like to support, the free book giveaways and the institution, please go ahead and make that donation, purchase. We'll send those books out to you. And again, Yedase, we thank you for that. So we're going to end it here. We will be back on tomorrow for Egua Marketplace. So again, we'd like to say Yedase. We thank you for tuning in to the broadcast, and Yebeshi Abio. We will meet again.